The president of Iran says the ongoing war is not serving American interests. In an open letter posted by the president on X, he addressed the American public and questioned whether America first is really a U.S. government priority. He urges Americans to look beyond political rhetoric and reconsider their view of his country. He says in its modern history, Iran has never, quote, chosen the path of aggression and never initiated any war. Hal Kempfer is a retired U.S. Marine intelligence officer and founder of Global Risk Intelligence and Planning. He joins us live from Los Angeles. Hal, first off, let's fact check that. The idea that Iran has been a pacifist nation?
Alex, that is just complete bunk. You know, they're throwing it out there. They have been pushing war everywhere, and particularly through their proxies. If you look at the Houthis, the Hezbollah and elsewhere, but also, don't forget the Iran-Iraq war and what they did in the 80s to block ships going through the Persian Gulf. Yeah, they've always been pushing war, and they've been pushing material out there to start war. So, when Pezeshkian says stuff like that, I just kind of put it aside and ignore it. And honestly, frankly, their information operations in that regard don't seem to work very well. They just don't resonate with the U.S. audience.
So President Trump spoke about the Strait of Hormuz opening naturally. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, that's a different term. I had to kind of wonder what he meant. I think he was kind of alluding to, if the U.S. pulls back, that other countries that are bigger stakeholders in keeping the strait open and getting oil out of there would jump in. And I think naturally was that there might be some natural gravitation of Asian countries and European countries that are more reliant on not just the oil, but the natural gas, the liquefied natural gas, the fertilizer, which is really huge, and of course, helium, which is so important for semiconductor fabrication, that these countries will put their assets in to open up the strait, particularly opening up with minesweepers to get the mines out that the Iranians have put in there, the sea mines, I should say. And the fact is that the U.S. doesn't have enough minesweepers, so we actually need them to do that.
Are you surprised by that? Because of all the sort of politics of this, the thing that the average American probably cares about the most is gas prices going up. And if the Strait of Hormuz is not opened up, whether it's naturally or unnaturally, the gas prices are going to continue to rise, right?
That's a great point. And and he says, hey, you can buy gas from North America or from the U.S. It's like, yeah, we do have gas and we can't export it. But here's the thing. Gasoline prices, oil prices are on a global market. We don't have a separate U.S. market. And then there's the Brent crude is on a separate thing. We all buy oil at the same rate. So that means that even though we produce enough oil in the U.S., it doesn't mean it's going to bring the cost down because, frankly, producers are going to sell at the going global rate. So if there's a shortage of oil around the world, we end up paying more.
Yeah, we were just looking at that Brent crude price, and we see it is up 5.5%, which is meaning that that market did not really like the message tonight. And that's a bad sign when it comes to all of us, when it comes to the gas prices that we're going to pay. An interesting phrase, President Trump suggested that in 2 to 3 weeks, the U.S. could send Iran, quote, back to the Stone Ages. What could that look like? What do you anticipate the next 2 to 3 weeks actually containing?
He's kind of alluded to this, basically hitting power plants. And if he takes out the power plants, he shuts off, obviously all the lights, but, keep in mind, yes, it's April, but they're going into summer. Summer is brutal in that part of the world. And so if you turn off that, you turn off the air conditioning, you shut down everything. And so it literally would set them back decades and decades, if you will, in terms of what they have to live with and their inability to rebuild those power plants quickly because of their lack of resources to do so. So I think that's what he's kind of alluding to. Although I will point out one thing. When he talks about this crushing blow in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the forces are coming on hand or partially there, but also coming in that would allow us to do something directly, militarily, boots on the ground in the Persian Gulf. Not an invasion of Iran, but in the Persian Gulf, taking some key places like islands. So that may be what he was alluding to as well.
Interesting, though, he did not say anything about ground troops tonight. And the other thing he didn't talk about was NATO. There was this big reporting beforehand, all these people saying he was going to talk about pulling the U.S. out of NATO. Wasn't a word about NATO or ground troops. So we'll see what he has to say about those things in the days ahead. Hal Kempfer, always grateful for your analysis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alex.